有请嘉宾上台。Welcome to the Israel Startup Nations Talent and Skill Gap Challenge Subforum. Let's welcome our speakers onto the stage.
Thank you. Thank you and good afternoon, and pleasure to see you here. My name is Yaki Dayan. I'm from EdTech Israel, and I'm just curious to know a little bit about the crowd that we have over here. How many of you are outside of China? Okay, I mean, about half of you. So those that are from China, what are you doing? I mean, how many of you are in the academia? How many of you are working in the education business? Some companies. Are there any maybe investors in the crowd or people coming from the investment community? Okay. So when the GS asked about having a session over here about Israel, we discussed, and I believe that the right theme would be the talent and skills gap from the Israeli perspective. How many of you have ever been to Israel? Mark, you can take. How many? Okay, not that many. So I don't know how much you know about Israel, but Israel is definitely smaller than China. Okay, so let's start with that. And I think that one of the things that may be interesting about Israel is that maybe sometimes you can see some things over there that maybe because of the smaller country and the thing that they are very much more intense, you can see maybe some trends or things that sometimes are not that easy to discover when you go to other markets and you go to especially larger markets like China or the United States. Now, I would like to take you into some journey that starts with me, giving some context, and then I invite some honorable people like Professor Hanoch Gutfreund and Yair Albin from the Hebrew University and from the embassy to speak from their perspective, and then we'll open up a panel about this session, about this topic. And during this journey, I would like to present things as if someone was actually planning things to happen, okay? Because I'm going to connect some dots, but not necessarily all those dots, people planned in advance that it will happen. I think that's the very interesting thing about ecosystem. You want to make change. I mean, I assume that everyone over here wants to make change, okay? But ecosystem usually have the way to resist change. So when you try to make such a change, you don't know where it's going to lead, but it's always easier to look at retrospect and connect the dots. So let me give you something about a few numbers about Israel, a few, let's say, attributes. It appears that Israel is the #1 in the world in researchers per capita. That's amazing. And some rank us second in innovation globally. And in terms of engineers per capita, we also have a very impressive number. And not that many people are aware of, but there are about 380 multinational companies that operate in Israel. Now, what are multinational companies? Small companies like Google, Facebook, Intel, Cisco, and so on and so forth. Companies that, for some reason, maybe very good reason, they decided to have their R&D facilities in Israel or their innovation headquarters in Israel there are already more than 1,000, I think more than that, people in Israel working for Apple. You know about this small company called IBM. The global center of IBM, research center of IBM in AI is in Haifa in Israel. So there is a fair representation of global markets and global companies in Israel. Now, I'd like to take it maybe to some other angle of looking at it. When you are in such a position, you need to race constantly to maintain this position. You cannot sleep. Because if you sleep and you flip and you go below the numbers, then everyone starts to get irritated. Why? Because it is so fundamental for the economic growth of Israel. Actually, almost half of Israel's GDP is generated from the tech sector. It's amazing. About 9% of the Israeli workforce is employed in tech companies. We have constantly a shortage of 15% of engineers and skilled workers in the tech industry, which is, for us as an Israelis, it is very alarming, because we can actually know how much we can gain more if we have another one from those people. And also an amazing number of 1 out of 4 companies that are based in Israel, Israeli companies based in Israel, have about a quarter of their R&D done offshore. Why? Because sometimes they cannot find the skilled workers in Israel. By the way, the timer is not working, so I will never know if I need to finish on time because the timer is stuck on 10 minutes. So just make sure, because otherwise, I will consume all the time and no one else will be able to speak. Now, this report was done by the Israel Innovation Authority and by Startup Nation Central that wanted to check exactly why and where and how can we generate and how can we bring more people into the tech industry. Because again, unlike maybe other nations, it's very polarized in Israel. This is the industry that's bringing the money. Okay, you need to be there. By the way, what does it mean that this is the industry that brings the money? That if you work at the Israeli tech industry, you probably earn much more than anyone else. And your work conditions are very, very good. But let's not forget that all this wealth is going only to 9% of the workforce. And most of the people in this workforce are university trained, Jewish, male. Now, one thing we do, EdTech Israel is running a summit in Tel Aviv every year, and we had the head of the Israel Innovation Authority as a keynote in our last summit in June, and he portrayed how Israel can bridge this skill gap. He said, we need to change the entry channel, meaning what people are calling coding boot camps and everything, and train people on the job instead of just waiting for people to go to universities. We need to do coding boot camps in order to convert people from other industries to go into the tech industry. We also need to give more incentives for people that go and learn engineering degrees. And we also open our borders so experts that want to come to Israel can work in Israel and get a visa. And so on and so forth. But when you look at all those things, I would like to introduce another very important concept, which is the concept of urgency. Because, yes, we can wait until the academia will generate enough engineers. It will take 10, 15 years. And, the numbers will continue to go. Yes, we can do coding boot camps, but not necessarily we can actually bring so many people to do all this. So definitely, many of those solutions are not necessarily achievable. And why we are talking about this wonderful synergy between technology and education? Because technology allows us to do things scalable and sustainable. So definitely, if we will just use the old techniques, do the old brick and mortar training and so on, it will not help us close the gap. And I would like to introduce another concept. In Israel, we used to say there is this term called the state of Tel Aviv. Now, you cannot read Hebrew, but there's even a book about that, and it highlights the central part of Israel. And the title, if you translate it into English, says the state of Tel Aviv is a threat to the state of Israel. Why is that? Because if you consider this small part, which is definitely not half of the population of Israel, this is where most of the GDP is coming from. This is about 90 or something, even more than 90% of the tech sector exists over there. Over there, people get, their salaries are 2 times or even better than other places in Israel. And over there, there are some unrepresented populations, like Jewish Orthodox, like Arabs, which means that this state of Tel Aviv behaves very different from the rest of Israel. And this is causing a lot of concern in Israel. Because when we look at this and say, you cannot, go too much to the extreme on one end and leave the other underserved. And, not many people look at it, but if you actually look at English skills, it's probably a common theme, when we in China speak about this. In the tech sector, you cannot work if you don't have very, very good English. But the rest of the Jewish population, their English grades are definitely lower, but it goes even deeper and deeper down if you actually go to some other populations in Israel, like Arabs and Orthodox. So it's not even if we'll do so many coding boot camps. I mean, they still have even the language barrier that prevents them from this. So to talk about all this from different angles, we are going to have here a very esteemed panel. And I would like to call our next speaker, Professor Hanoch Gutfreund from the Hebrew University. Yeah. Yeah.
So I never entrepreneured a startup. I devoted all my life to educating young students at the Hebrew University. And as you had heard now, most of the people who make our nation a startup nation have been educated at our universities. Now, I, as you already know, acted as its president, before that as a rector, and before that as a researcher. My field is physics. Since I retired about 20 years ago, I am still very much involved, have an office, and spend every day at the university. Now, in recent years, like every university, our university receives visitors from abroad. In the last year, the majority of our visitors, by far, come from China. Individuals, groups from academia, groups from business, and as every visitor, They come to a university, and one of them wants to visit the medical school, and another delegation wants to visit our School of Agriculture and Business School, and so on. But without exception, every single visitor to our university wants to visit two assets that we have. One is a center that we formed recently that is called We Innovate. And that is all about innovation. That is an example of what a university can do in this respect. The other one is the Albert Einstein Archives. The Albert Einstein Archives is a collection of more than 80,000 documents, many in his handwriting, that shed light on everything that Einstein did. Tomorrow, I'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about what we can learn from Einstein when we speak about this modern quest for innovation. But today, I would like to focus a little bit about what my university does in order to create within the university an innovation ecosystem. Because you see, when we talk today about innovation, we have to be a little more specific what we mean. Because there is nothing new in innovation. It accompanies the history of mankind. If there wouldn't be innovation, we would still live in caves. So innovation was always there. Today we talk about something. You see, one cannot think about somebody who was more innovative than Albert Einstein. But that is not what we mean today. What we mean today by innovation is a whole culture. The word ecosystem applies here, because what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is a balance is the name, combination of many, many elements. And in that sense, innovation is a set of good ideas, many enterprises, many players, public, individual, institutional. Many is the aspect here. Again, even science today is done differently. 100 years ago, a certain phenomenon that is called gravitational waves, I will not tell you what it is, it stirs the imagination of mankind, was predicted. The paper was one author, Albert Einstein. 100 years later, it was confirmed. The paper has 1,300 authors. That shows that to make progress, all this student, enterprises, researchers, everything has to come in. The goal of our center, We Innovate, was to create at the university an innovation culture. Now, that does not mean that every student, 25,000, has to be an entrepreneur and has to be a startup, to start. If that would be the case, it would be another danger to the state of Israel. There is low tech, there is zero tech, everything is important. But an innovation atmosphere, an innovation culture is a place where everybody, all researchers, all students, and administration are aware of the importance. We Innovate encourages students who entrepreneur. We help them. And it is important that everybody at the university knows about these results. Today we offer 36 different courses in innovation. These courses are very different from the ordinary courses. It's very different as we innovate from every interdisciplinary research center. It is in itself a result of innovation and entrepreneuring in the university culture. So this is something anybody who comes to the Hebrew University I will guide you through the Albert Einstein archives. My colleague will take you to We Innovate. So these were my introductory remarks. As you can imagine, I have much more to say on this, but let's listen to our colleagues, or you may ask me questions.
I think that I recall that you received this question and I'm sure that you received this question so many times in your life. How can we make more Einsteins?
Okay, my answer to that would be surprising to you. I think this is not important, and this is not the right question. What is important is to make sure that thousands of people will understand Einstein. Because the Einsteins do not depend on any educational system. If you would know in what educational system Einstein performed and succeeded, you would not wish that kind of system to your children or to anybody today. The Einsteins, they will appear, they will be there, they will be maybe of different natures. He was not the only one. There were many giants of intellect, and all of them evolved in spite of an educational system. The educational system has to create hundreds of people who understand. What skills does it take to be part of this new culture? This is another question that you may ask. I will specifically relate to that in the plenary session tomorrow.
So we don't want to steal the plenary session surprise, but some people think that you can simply create a certain process, a certain procedure, so you take people and do whatever you do, and at the end they will come innovative. Now, you already gave a hint to that when you said an ecosystem. What do you say about all those initiatives that try to manufacture innovation?
No, look, as far as people are concerned, I distinguish between education and training. And we are talking about education. Now, we know what kind, there are all these, these words like thinking out of the box, the ability to learn, lifelong learning, the ability to adapt to new situations. Very important, in my view, is failure tolerance. You don't know, that I emphasize tomorrow, maybe Einstein is a scientist who more than any other scientist published wrong papers. Totally wrong. So, a tolerance of failure, a feeling at ease with ambiguity, all such things, I think that I know how to put contents in them. I think that I know how to, I'm already looking from the summit of my life at my younger colleagues. My younger colleagues, I think that they know in their treatment of students how to emphasize those things. One thing which is very important in education, and I was not aware of that when I was a teacher, when I taught at the university. Had I known what I know today, my students would benefit greatly, much more than they did. Because we learn from textbooks. We teach. Textbooks give you results. We teach results. We almost never teach the method or the road to the results. Most cases, and everybody who is now is experiencing it today, understand that it is a tumultuous way to a good result. That is also something that should be kept in mind.
Thank you. So you talked on the education side and skill sets and so forth. I'd like to add Yair to the stage. And
Do I go back?
And I think that, Yair, maybe you can, I mean, your title is Trade and Investment Mission, so definitely you are about economics. So what can you share maybe on the economic side of innovation?
Yes, of course. First, maybe I'll have too many titles, but also it's very nice, first of all, to meet you all, and thank you very much, Yaki, for organizing this panel, and for GES Organizing Committee for inviting me here. But another title is not only the head of trade and investment mission, but I also represent the Israeli Ministry of Economy and Industry in the embassy here in Beijing. Before being called Economy and Industry, we had another name called Industry and Commerce. So I will touch the commerce side soon, but as the ministry is responsible to have regulations and to regulate and to encourage the Israeli industry, we also have important branches that are dealing with what you presented before, the gap in skilled employees and professional employees in Israel that is now soaring. By the way, not only in the high-tech sector. Israel is a small country. We have a small economy. We have a big shortage, for example, in construction workforce. Therefore, we have agreements with Ministry of Commerce of China and Finance of China to bring more workforce to Israel in the field, for example, of infrastructure and construction. But if we are talking on the high-level skills, so also it worries the decision makers in the Israeli government, also in my ministry, and I will quote the Minister of Economy and Industry, Minister Eli Cohen, who said that the increasing the number of workers in the high-tech sector is an important task in light of the industry's contribution to the state of Israel's economy and exports. In order to continue to lead this field, we must strive to retain Israeli innovation and brains in the country and provide them with the right platform to staff the many high-tech jobs on offer. That, as we saw before from the research from last year, stands on about 15% of shortage. So the Ministry of Economy and Industry, together with the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Welfare and Labor, I think this is the English name, put a lot of emphasis to find new plans to educate the young people from preschool, going, of course, to middle school and high school and academia, to vocational training, to professional training schools and institutions, and also to cooperate internationally, where I will also touch. Because if we talk about the demand and the supply of skilled workforce, so I'm here, my role here in the embassy is to increase the demand, actually, is to promote Israel as a land of innovation, to have the Chinese government, companies, audience, together, of course, with a big team in the embassy led by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to have Israel on the map whenever a Chinese entity is looking for innovation, for new technologies, for them to come to Israel, where my role specifically is to promote investments into Israel and promote exports of Israeli technologies and products here into China. But although in the past we talked with China, if I would go a decade ago, that's what I've heard, I was not here back then, we talked mostly about, again, promoting trade with China in selling Israeli technologies, in selling Israeli know-how and products. Nowadays, of course, this is a big part of what we do. China is the second biggest trade partner of Israel, if we go starting from 3 years ago. And today, in addition to the trade in information, in technology, and products, we also have a lot of cooperation with China in this regards. in all sectors, in all aspects, going from telecommunication, programming, agriculture technologies, life science, automotive technologies, and etc. And of course, education technologies, where we also can mention here, Tal Education is one of the co-organizers of this event, and we had a very big success story, thanks to Claire from my team who sits here in the audience, also thanks to her, of course, with CodeMonkey. I guess we will hear more about that later on. So Israeli EdTech is very relevant for the Chinese market. In addition to that, going back to where the Ministry of Economy and Industry is working to leverage also the supply of talented workforce in Israel, so and to increase we discussed before. Professor Gutfreund mentioned about the ecosystem, the importance of the ecosystem. So the ministry, together with its partners, for example, Startup Nation Central, the Israeli Export Institute, and others, is focusing a lot on building ecosystems, building communities. If we say that Tel Aviv, by many international indexes, is considered to be the second best hub for encouraging innovation, we understood that for the government role in pushing forward the financial initiative called Yozma in the 90s, that pushed forward all the VC vibe in Israel and the financial instruments that allow for these ecosystems to grow. Now we focus more on sub-ecosystems, on building communities in specific sectors. For example, we have a big automotive technologies community. We have healthcare. We have a newly founded last year food tech technology. Everywhere that we can find that Israel has a leading advantage worldwide, we put the extra mile and emphasis also from the ministry and our partners in order to enhance this and to bring more innovation, to bring more money into the system, to encourage, of course, the private sector to work there, and to bring our labor. Of course, that as the Ministry of Industry in Israel, although it sounds a bit weird for the nation of innovation to focus on industry, we also encourage advanced industries to stay in Israel or to move into Israel. One of these tools is to encourage the big multinational corporates to come to Israel, invest in Israel either in their R&D, to enjoy the Israeli ability in innovation, and also later on to going up to the production line, also to production, and etc. We can take IBM, you mentioned, Intel, and etc. So I think that we have a major role also for the government. I can also say we discussed, I mentioned in one word about the cooperation with the Ministry of Education for vocational training. Also the Ministry of Education in the past few years put a lot of emphasis to encourage young students in the high school to go to a higher level in mathematics mostly, whereas we figured out it's a very important tool for the high-tech, high-end technologies industries in Israel to have better workforce there. And the Ministry of Labor, together we have decided of a few industrial areas in Israel that will focus on encouraging these communities. For example, food tech will be in the northern part of Israel, and the cyber capital will be in Beersheba, the southern part of Israel, and etc. Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Yair. And I'd like to take what you just said and also this notion of ecosystem to another level. And yes, we discussed so far about the university role, about innovation, about the tech sector. But I would like to take this conversation slightly to a different direction, if I may, and then invite the two other panel members to join us. Today everyone is speaking about human capital. So I will give you an example from a company that is now doing some very interesting work in the issue of human capital, that they said, okay, let's take a company like 30,000 employees, 50,000 employees, a mid-size or even larger. Typically, if you ask the people from the HR, they know very little, only very few people in the organization, by name or by personality. For them, the rest are pretty much invisible. If you ask people from the L&D, from the learning and development or whatever, usually they place most of their emphasis on the executives, top executives, and so on. So now there are those companies that say, today with today's tool, we can map the entire organization. Once we map the entire organization, now we have much better visibility into the human capital of the entire organization. And, you know, maybe in this organization there is this 20,000 people or 10,000 people, no, that's not okay, that even if we just, you know, improve their skills by very, very little, we contribute a lot to the entire human capital of the company. More than that, usually, let's apply this concept to a nation. So if we focus so much on the 9% of the tech sector, on the engineers, etc., what about the other 91% or the other 90% of the population? Now, usually, there's a lot of money into the 9%, okay? When we actually go to the other extreme, we usually expect this to happen from non-profit organizations, which is nice, but you know, many of them are not that scalable and sustainable. So the concept of trying to reach anyone is now becomes more, you know, even interesting when you say, okay, maybe we can scale it and using technology. But very often, we forget who is taking care of the people in the middle. That, you know, they are not on this end, so they are not, you know, powered by the industry, but they are not on the other end, so they are not being viewed by the non-profit organization. Now, think about this as a very big challenge, not only on a company scale, but when you scale it also to a national level. How can we actually create a dramatic change when we start to look on all those talents that usually we skip because this is where non-profit exists, and the other end, this is where the industry can take care of itself. So I'd like to invite two more panel members to the stage, and Harel from MindCET, and Mark from eTeacher. No, we stay. And we are going to... Okay, so, you know, Harel, I'd like to start with you. Because, you know, I picked this picture to give you a feeling what it means to be, when we say in Israel, a periphery. You know, that's somewhere in the desert. It's definitely, I know, it's only about an hour and a half from Tel Aviv, so I mean, it's not like, you know, here in the traffic jams of Beijing, but in Israel, for us, that's a periphery. So can you tell us a little bit about MindCET and also what you were doing over there?
Yes, first of all, it's a little funny to talk about periphery in China, where Israel is roughly a district in Beijing. But surprisingly, periphery and center versus centers behaves the same in a great country like China and Israel. So I'm Harel. I'm a VP of Business Development at MindCET. MindCET is a hub for education technology. Our charter is relatively simple. We believe that we can bring the disruption to the education technology, and we believe that the startups are the change of agent, and then they should be in the focus of whatever we do. So we have accelerators, we have a fund to invest, and we work in a global expansion, but this is not what I was asked to talk about today. I was asked to talk about the gaps between the periphery and the center of a country or a industry. And this picture is taken in our backyard, in our headquarters backyard. Our headquarters is in Yerucham. which is very small town in the desert. When I say very small town, is not like 2 million people. It's 12,000 people. And you talked a lot about ecosystem. You talked a lot about how to create an ecosystem. I think ecosystem is, first of all, an ecological system. It's combined of components and combined of a lot of moving parts. It usually involves academy and government and industry, and all of those parts are working together. What we do in MindCET in this regards is that we turn our heads from the center of Israel, and we actually found that if you look 5 degrees from the center, you find a blue ocean. A blue ocean that involves all the sectors that you talked about, the Arabs and the Orthodox, and people who are no less talented than the people in the center of Israel. You just need to put a little budget allocation and attention to those areas, and you find that really a treasure. And I give you a very small example. Let's say that you would like to open a startup in Israel. The first area that you're gonna explore is Tel Aviv, because this is the center. And then you take a CTO from Tel Aviv, and you start a startup. But then again, it's Tel Aviv, Yaki, like you said. You have Google, and you have Apple, and you have Facebook, and after 3 months, your CTO is being sucked to one of these companies that pays him 6 times the amount that you can pay, and your startup is dead. Now, if you go to the desert, look for yourself. There's no Apple. There's no Facebook. There's you and your startup and your CTO that will continue to work with you until you do the exit that you dreamed of. And this is what we have recognized, and this is the, for me, looking at the periphery areas is a blue ocean.
Thank you. And we also have with us Mark from eTeacher. Now, eTeacher have done something which sounds like almost selling ice to the Eskimos. I mean, Israel is so crowded with so many coding academies, etc., and you opened something and in this crowded space. Can you tell us a little bit about it? What eTeacher is doing and what this?
Sure. So, yeah, my name is Mark Turley. I work for a Geneva, Switzerland-based investment group called Pomoja Capital. It's a family office and investment group. And one of the investments that we've had for a very long time is in an Israeli company called eTeacher Group. eTeacher provides small group, teacher-led, real-time online instruction. And each one of those words is important because, as you see here at a conference like this, there are so many different things you can do under the general heading of online learning. But we have a very specific model focused on small groups because we think that there are certain subjects that are particularly well suited to teaching and learning in a small group. So we have 4 schools that you see here, and I'll just say what they are, but then I'm going to focus in on one of them. One is the Israel Institute of Biblical Studies, which is the world's largest teacher of ancient languages. If anybody's interested in the story of how that evolved, it's kind of interesting, but I don't think it's the focus here. Rosen School of Hebrew, teaching modern Hebrew to students worldwide. Highway to English, small group learning for adults learning English. But what Yaki, I think, is referring to here is our newest venture, which is called Techie Uni. And Techie Uni uses small group, real-time, teacher-led learning to teach children how to code and to teach them what we call broadly digital arts. Could be animation, could be YouTube creation, but creativity and in the digital realm. And so in this sense, I think it fits in well with the theme here because we're addressing the skills gap at the earliest age before anyone even recognizes it as an app. And I think I'd like to link into the professor's words at the beginning that, you know, you can't create an Einstein. We're blessed with Einsteins from time to time. They just kind of spring up. But what we need to do is educate our societies to leverage the brilliant thinking of the many Einsteins. So if you think about coding, everybody thinks, well, kids, they're natural coders, right? They play games, and if you just give them a gamified environment, they'll learn to code, they'll teach themselves. And of course, that's true for a lot of children in absolute numbers, but not really for a large percentage of children. And I think that a lot of parents around the world have recognized how important coding is for their children. It's one of the new literacies, you know, reading and writing and mathematics and coding, right? But not every kid is one of those kids who's going to teach themselves to code. Now, there are some countries in the world where coding is already part of the curriculum. Israel's one of those countries. There are a lot of other countries in the world where it's not part of the curriculum and where you've got to find an alternative way to learn to code. And if you're trying to find it for your children and they're not those self-motivated children, well, you're going to have to find a way to motivate those children as well as to teach them. And that's where we think our methodology is particularly well suited. So if your kid's one of those kids who's going to teach himself to code, get him a game, get them a learning environment where they can do that. But if your kid's part of the other 80% or 90%, get them a teacher. And we offer those teachers. So what we do is we set up classes of 10 to 15 kids, right? We have a whole curriculum starting with Scratch for the youngest kids. A lot of you may know Scratch. Moving on to text-based languages and app development as a way of learning coding, because that's something where you can see the product, where you can send it to your family and your friends and say, look at this cool app that I created, right? But we don't just guide them to self-learning. We take them through a process with their friends, with a group of other students from all over the world. And we do this in 6 languages. So we're now teaching coding to kids between age 7 and 14, and we're teaching it in English, French, Spanish, German, Hebrew, and Arabic. And we can have a quiz later or a guess about which of those languages are growing fastest. It's not English. But in any case, that's our contribution to closing the kids gap, the skills gap at the youngest age.
Well, I would like to take this to the angle of, closing the social demographic skills gap, okay? Because maybe it was not apparent and not obvious from what you just said, but the teacher can be in Tel Aviv and the student can be in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
And it means, and actually this is majority of the students at eTeacher are not Israeli. That's, by the way.
And the majority of the teachers are also not Israeli or in Israel.
This is also something, that you need very well to know. The DNA of Israeli companies is always look for international markets because we have zero market. So, meaning that if we actually want to go and reach all the way to people in Yerucham or in Druze in the north or Bedouins in the south, then this is something that now becomes very much accessible. And if we go back maybe to the basic things that you just mentioned at the beginning about teaching and learning, we best learn from teachers. It's still the case. So, with all due respect to MOOCs or to the other extreme of one-on-one learning, still this teacher-led group has some very, very deep pedagogical meaning. Professor Gutfreund, from your perspective, how can we leverage, those new technologies, those new concepts, in order maybe to do something to close more the social demographic gaps in Israel?
My experience in life, and it's not a very optimistic message that I'm going to give you now, over decades, not only as a teacher and researcher, but also very much involved in Israeli science policy, education policy, numerous committees, national and international, on every subject that you can imagine, reforms in high schools, reforms in the teaching of mathematics. The major problem is not with the students, but with the teachers. Teachers, it is very difficult for teachers to readapt, to change. They are more conservative. I agree. I'm not a big fan of mass online learning. This is something very different. I think that if we talk about education, And there was a very illuminating lecture this morning by Carol Wieman from Stanford about teaching methods. Those kinds of teaching methods, I think, cannot be effectively applied through Coursera. Yeah? This online instant feedback. Teachers, in my view, are the major bottleneck in this progress education, and we should devote a lot of thinking how to tackle that problem.
But what about if, it's not only things that we learn just in schools, that's a very, very, very used proverb in Israel, that what made us startup nation is not what we learn in school, is what we learn also outside of school. When you work with, I believe, in kids in Yerucham, isn't this also the role model that you give in them, not just the academic values?
Absolutely. We actually, concerning this subject, we have a plan, a program for teacher entrepreneurs. We take teachers that have an idea, and we give them a training on how to make this idea not a startup, but how to think like an entrepreneur. At the end of this program, those teachers are going back to classes, and now they think like an entrepreneur. They teach, they understand the kids better. They are the role model, but they speak a whole different language, a new language that they learned during this program. And when you take someone that is working in teaching students and give them the stage to develop an idea, and after 6 to 9 months, he become entrepreneur, and then he goes back to class. He speaks a different language to the kids. He is being a different role model for the kids. So absolutely yes, the outcome of this program is the change that we see. We are changing the mindset of the teachers, and then we are touching the kids. This is a whole process that's starting by giving the teachers the stage, giving them the opportunities, taking their ideas as users. And you see those ideas are great because they are coming from a need. They're coming from a teacher that teaches kids, and they see what is the need, what is missing, and what needs to be developed in order to target this need. So the answer is absolutely yes.
I think I know that we need to finish, so I'll just conclude with a few remarks and maybe have a request from you, Yair, about the things that we can do better. I would like to I wish that we can do a lot of transformation and everything related to education, learning, human capital. And I think we live in a very exciting times because the technologies that are being done and adopted are changing constantly. So we cannot look at what has been done 10 years ago because it's not more of the same. New things are coming. And I see a lot of value. You say that you are here as an ambassador of the Israeli industry. I'd like to invite you to also to come to Israel and also engage in a conversation in Israel. We run a summit every June. And this summit, I would argue, it's about question marks. It's not about exclamation marks. It's about an opportunity to meet peers from the US, Europe, Israel, from all types of the innovation industry, from the industry, from academia, from thought leaders and so on. And we invite you to take part, and I'll be very grateful, if you can convey this also to, because it's not about just a specific industry. Because at the end of the game, when we try to improve any industry, it goes to upskilling, reskilling. It's, again, everything that relates to learning and improving your talent is in the basis of that. So I definitely would like to take the opportunity to thank you all for listening and invite you, if you can, to come to our summit in June and join the conversation over there. Thank you very much.
本环节到此结束，请有序退场。您可以通过大会官网获取更多大会日程安排。感谢您的参与。